Okay, so I wanted to tell you how, well, I was going to answer how StatCrunch does confidence intervals compared to StatDisk, but the problem is I can't load StatDisk, and it's been a long time since I've used it, so I can't remember off the top of my head how they compare. And so I'm just going to give you a quick overview of at least StatCrunch, since that's what you asked to compare with. And I'm going to reference you to the Tools for Success. So Tools for Success, that's that page that you went to in fact install StatDisk, has a StatDisk laboratory manual. And this, I think, is a shortened version. I don't know that it's the whole thing. It also has a StatCrunch laboratory manual. So you could try those out and go to the confidence interval sections and see how they compare. There's also the review cards here. The one that I allow you to use during the test is the StatCrunch study card. I don't know if there's a StatDisk study card. Actually, I don't see it listed here, so I think the answer is no. Incidentally, before I leave this page, that calculator tutorial is a good tool to use if you want to try to see how the calculator does it, because it does offer some other options. Okay, and before I leave that, or before I leave this discussion, let me remind you that the approved formula and review sheets have the fold out, if you're going to do it by hand with the review card, okay, has the appendix. I'm going to go ahead and open that one. If you were going to use the calculator, this one's a really quick one that says, okay, if you're going to do a confidence interval, you're going to hit the stat, put in your list. If you actually have the data, do z interval and follow from there, and so on. Okay, or the other review card down here with other details, and then there's the StatCrunch card and so on. Okay, let's go ahead and get to my example. So in here, I can click on StatCrunch, and here's how StatCrunch does confidence intervals. You choose stat, then you got to know initially, are you going to be using a t distribution or z distribution? So keep in mind, you're going to be using a z distribution if the population standard deviation is known. Now that seems foolish, right? Because if it was known, then we probably knew the population mean, right? Because to get the standard deviation, you have to have the mean to be able to calculate all the deviations from the mean. So this is more of an exercise, a practice of understanding the process. It's not a reality, because if you had the population, I can't imagine a time where if you truly had the population standard deviation that you didn't have the population mean, in which case you wouldn't need to create a confidence interval around it, right? But if that's the case, you come over here and then you say, is the population normally distributed, yes or no? Okay, if it is, go straight to your z distribution. If it's not, then the question is your sample size greater than 30? If it is, go over here. If not, you're going to have to use other methods that we don't have yet and won't get for quite some time. Now, the reason why we do this is because once you know this process, you can understand really the process we want to use, which is developed for using the t-distribution. Is sigma known? No, of course not, right? Then you follow over here. Is the population normally distributed? Well, we could find out maybe from a histogram of the population distribution, or maybe if we know something about the data, we know what kind of data it is and that it comes normally distributed. So you either make that just assumption, or you follow to the next list here, and the next item here, which is the sample size n greater than 30? So if the sample size is big enough, we go over here. If not, we say, well, we can't go any further right now. So, I'm sorry, I was over here. So you got to know which one you're going to use, okay? And if you're doing proportion stats, this is going to use the z distribution, but it's going to use it for proportions. So you follow this one sample. Do you have the data, or do you have the summary of information? So the statistics, in other words. So t-distribution, one sample. Each time we've just been doing one sample with the data. Now, if it's already given to you, then you probably clicked on this StatCrunch from the problem itself, and then it has the data listed right here, right? So you would just be choosing one sample data, and all you have to really do is choose your confidence level. Or similarly for stats, if you have the data and you're doing the Z-stat, you just click that. So I'm not going to necessarily click on all of these because I'll just leave it to you to click on them. But all of these, I'll click on the one I'm on right now, can be used in the confidence interval chapter that we're doing right now, or in the next chapter, chapter 8, when you're doing your hypothesis testing. So you see the options here that you can choose what confidence level you want. Of course, I chose the one where I had values, so I'd have to have some of those values, and I'd have to say the number of successes that I had, and so on. I hope that helps. I think that's pretty close to StatDisk and how it runs in StatDisk. You're just going to be going up to a file menu on the left instead of using this. Just taking a couple looks at them. Yeah, so if you have the statistics, you could put the sample mean in because you've already got X bar. You could put I'm sorry, this would be assuming you have the population standard deviation, so that's what you're going to put there. Remember, I'm using the Z distribution, right? Sample size. So put in that information, change it to confidence level, choose your confidence level, whatever it is, run it. It'll give you your limits. Hope this helps.